Heavens a buzzy. I cannot say good day today. It is June 1st, and unless something new starts, we really are at a place where there is so much going on in this country that needs to get unpacked that I can't just talk about the fact that coronavirus is going to be okay. One of the things about coronavirus that has been frequently discussed in the media is the fact that it disproportionately is taking a toll upon minorities. Specifically, 92.3 per 100,000 African Americans die of coronavirus. The number for whites is about half that, less than half, 45.2. The reasons why African Americans and Latinos, but specifically African Americans, are disproportionately affected has to do with a lot of the aspects that is causing there to be rioting in the streets right now. The reason that people are frustrated is not just George Floyd. It's because the factors that are part of why African Americans are disproportionately affected by coronavirus are part of an ongoing systemic racial injustice that we haven't talked about. I was asked by my son on Friday night whether or not my friends and I were talking about George Floyd. And I said, yeah, of course. He said, what are you doing about racism? Deploring it? Being opposed? I mean, I signed a petition. And he said, if you're not actively doing something, it means that you are accepting the status quo that in this country for the past 20 years has led to deaths of African Americans with coronavirus. It's led to people in the streets rioting. It's led to this overwhelming despair and frustration. And as I thought about it, I thought, you know, he's exactly right. You know, why are there more issues with coronavirus in African American communities? Well, some of it's because there are multi-generational families that are living together because they can't afford to be elsewhere. Some of it is because there are disproportionately lower access to health care, to preventative health care, to places to exercise. There are lower numbers of healthy foods that can be eaten in African American communities. And you know, I was talking to one of my neighbors who said, you know, it's so much better than when I was a kid. Now I'm 51 and he's probably in his mid-60s. And I said, you know what? I know that it's better in many ways than it was in the 60s or 70s, but I was in med school and graduated in 95. And there's a lot of stuff that is worse now than it was then. And I just want to show you some of these things. And then I want to tell you that it is now time for you, the non-racist, privileged person who is listening to this, to do something active. So let's talk about what's changed in the last 20 years. So first of all, since 1963, here is what has happened to the average family's wealth. And if you are white, your wealth has gone up 5 times. And if you're African American, it's gone up fractionally. 7 times if you're white, fractionally if you're African American. And so it's not just about wealth, it's also about the savings for wealth. So African Americans are less likely to be in a job that has a 401k, but they're also less likely to participate, and they're less likely to be approached and pushed to have retirement savings. And even when they are, the rates are often different. This is what you get when you retire when you're white, and this is when you're African American. And these numbers have gotten progressively worse and worse in their disparity over the past 20 years. Things are not getting better. So what are some of the reasons for that? Well, some of the reasons are because we do have a differential of wealth and education. But it's not just that you have a difference in the property taxes. It's also, in this study in 2015, so if you look at people in the same percentages of school lunches, so this is the same degree of poverty, but the little white circles are all white, and the little dark circles are where you've got more dark people in those communities. And if you look and see how much money is spent per person, if you're darker, you're getting less, despite the fact that you're in the same exact financial strata. So this just shows that less money is being spent on our children who are African American or darker skinned. And when you look at the something that's getting better. So if you look at, here's 2000, and you look at children who are born to parents with bachelor's degrees. So there has been an uptick, and there are more African American parents who are raising children who are going to have more advantages. But look at the disproportion and what it's costing. This is the average debt burden for black families who've got an higher education debt. This is for white families. So even how much they're paying for it is different. And some people will say, like, well, the thing is, if the parents would just help them out more in school, they would do better, they would perform better, they'd be more likely to get advanced degrees if the parents were both there, but they're not. Part of why they're not? Because if you have not talked to a black friend or acquaintance, if you don't have black friends, but if you haven't talked to somebody about driving while black, it is a very real thing. Every single one of them is going to tell you a story about having a tail light out or having something and being pulled over. You can't have anything wrong with your car if you're driving. So here are some of the statistics from Ferguson about how many whites are pulled over versus how many blacks. And why are they pulled over? So if you're white, you're being pulled over because you're speeding or doing a moving violation. If you're black, you're being pulled over because there's something wrong with your car. There's some excuse to pull people over. And looking at the population that's searched, so the police are searching more African Americans than whites, but what they're finding is that more whites are having drugs or contraband on them than blacks. And the biggest thing is that after this, the blacks are being arrested at twice the rate, and a lot of times they're being arrested from what started with an equipment problem. So I could go on. I mean, this is looking at wealth by age, and the discrepancies for the older generations are just higher and higher, and blacks aren't making any gains. And so we are letting people down by not doing anything. Why are people rioting in the streets? Because for 20 years, there has been an enormous improvement for white America, and there's not been a change for black America. And if you're not doing something active, it's not going to change. So we're going to post a list that Esquire magazine put out, but if you're asking about what can you do, there's also a list and a repository of different statistics and things to understand racial inequality more. But you can do so much. You can, first of all, you can donate. You can give your children money and have them pick a charity to donate. You can call a black church in your community and ask them who's hurting and who needs some help. You can have a meeting with people in your neighborhood and watch Trevor Noah's piece on why saying something is an inappropriate form of protest has never worked. Was it inappropriate when the earliest Americans threw tea into the Boston Harbor to protest taxes? There is some place where you've got to do something different than what we're doing. And if you want to support the peaceful protests that are going on, then right now, do something. I was at Lowe's on Sunday, and my kids both protested. I made a kit, a first aid kit for one of them, because he was expecting to get tear gassed. He was expecting to get hit with rubber bullets, and he wanted to be able to help other people that got hurt. And he wanted to be on the front line so that the African Americans in the crowd weren't the ones who were getting arrested, because he knew he was white and could be able to get out of jail more easily. Didn't get arrested, didn't do anything violent. But after a weekend of that, when I went to Lowe's to buy something on Sunday, the young, gay, masked African American with bleach blonde hair who was working the register said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Fine, thanks." And then I said, "I mean, to be honest, it's been a weird weekend." And he said, "Yeah, it has." And I told him about how being a white woman driving an expensive car made it easier for me to get some of my friends out of an area curfew had expired and the police wouldn't let them get to their cars and they couldn't leave. And I got them out and I told him that, and he said, with tears in his eyes, "Thank you." And he said, "Can I hug you?" And this young man and I, his name is Jonathan, clung onto each other and like sobbed for a minute in the checkout line at Lowe's. So if you can't hug somebody, if you can't tell somebody that you care about them and that you're aware, and if you can't ask your friends to tell you what it's like to be black in America, then you have no right to comment on any of the protests that are going on. And until you've done that, and until you've thought about the fact that we have consistently had 20 years of worsening environments despite saying that we're not racist and that everyone's equal, if you don't agree that it is time now to do something, then email me and I'll be happy to talk to you further about it. This is our opportunity, and if we do not take advantage of this opportunity now, then when? And what does it say about us? I hope it's going to be fun.